Hi, this is Savannah Saunders from The Wonderful World of Dance, and today I'm at the Canadian Embassy with Emily Molnar, the Artistic Director for Ballet BC, or Ballet British Columbia, and we're here to talk about the new tour that's coming to the UK next year. Hi Emily.
Hello Savannah.
So, first of all, tell us about Ballet BC, or full name, Ballet British Columbia.
Ballet British Columbia is over 30 years old.
Wow.
It was founded in 1986, and it was always founded with the premise that it would be a contemporary ballet company. It's always been kind of a mid-sized company. We're one of 5 major ballet companies in Canada. We're the largest dance organization in BC, British Columbia, as you've mentioned. What's really unique about 8 years ago, I became the artistic director, and we've really turned the focus onto what is contemporary within ballet, and being more of a creation-based company. What does that mean? It means that about 3/4 of our repertoire are new works that are made on us. So that really helps to kind of follow our vision, which is to work on building 20th and 21st century repertoire and to really have a global conversation. So not only with our Canadian artists and choreographers, but also with internationally. So since 2009, we've created 45 new works, and in some cases we've brought choreographers into Canada who have never been seen before. So we're quite excited, and we base in Vancouver, so we're based in Vancouver, so we perform there 3 times a year, but we tour about 8 weeks of the year.
Wow, that is such an exciting premise for a ballet company to create so much unique work, and particularly contemporary work, as you say. So for those who don't quite know, well, what is contemporary ballet compared to ballet? If they want to go off to the theatre, what can audiences expect, or how would you define contemporary ballet?
It's a challenging thing to define. One, because one could argue that a great classical dancer today, if they're fully alive and inhabiting the work, they are a contemporary dancer doing classical work. For me and for the company, what is kind of our point of view on contemporary ballet is our dancers, first of all, are classically trained. So, and we work on point, with point work, but also on flat and all different kind of, in a variety of different ways. But that the training inside of the dancer's body comes first from a classical root. What we do with a choreographer then is that we build a language each time we make a piece. So you're not actually seeing our work, when you go to see a piece by Ballet BC, you're not necessarily seeing classical ballet in its codified form on stage, but it would not look the same if there wasn't the ballet training. So there is still a very strong sense of articulation in the body, of versatility and virtuosity in the body that comes from that classical training, even if we're not dancing original classical steps. But it does come out in their ability of each of the dancers to work with the choreographer and build almost like a new dictionary each time we make a new piece. So we have dancers who can improvise fluently, can also, we take ballet class every day, so it's very much in our training. And then I kind of describe what we do with contemporary ballet a bit more like a jazz musician. So you have to have great classical music training to be a great jazz musician. So that's kind of the departure of what I would say is contemporary ballet, where you're still holding on to its training, but you're kind of going that step further in developing movement invention when you actually deal with the repertoire.
I love the analogy with the jazz. I think that is a wonderful analogy. So tell us about some of the work which you're bringing over to the UK as part of the tour next year.
We're first of all very excited. Obviously we have a very special relationship with the UK coming from Canada. But to be able to come for 3 weeks into a market that has such a wonderful attention on international dance. We're proud to be able to bring a program of 3 female choreographers.
Brilliant.
So the works originally were done for Ballet BC or brought to Ballet BC at different times, but later on I curated the evening with the intention that, 3 very important female voices would come together, and I thought that was a nice way to demonstrate our vision. 2 of the works are existing works, so they were not made for us, so it's unusual, but we're very excited to have them. So one of the works is by Crystal Pite, who you're probably familiar with. She has her own wonderful company called Kit Pivot, but is obviously seen all over the world. Crystal actually is a former member of Ballet British Columbia. She danced with us. She also choreographed with the company in her early years when she was starting out. She created a beautiful work called Solo Echo for Netherlands Dance Theatre in 2012, and that is the work that we are bringing on the program.
Another great company.
Another great company. It's a beautiful piece.
Yeah.
It has all of the kind of the signature moments that I think are signature references to Crystal's choreography today. It's like a beautiful, precious poem, and it's to the music of Johannes Brahms. It's gorgeous. I could talk in more detail, but it's a very exciting work for 7 dancers. That is really about one person seen through 7 different people. Mm-hmm. Another piece that we're bringing is by a really exciting Israeli choreographer by the name of Sharon Ayel. It's also, she works very closely with her partner Guy Bahar. So the work is called Bill. It was made for the Batsheva Dance Company. We are very lucky to have the work. We're the first company in Canada to work with Sharon. If you haven't seen Sharon's work, it's hard to describe. It's fascinating. It's pulling on so many, often people say it's like looking at the past and the future at the same time. She's really dealing with images of the sensory body. There is an enormous expression that comes out and a beautifully crafting of a very large group. Everyone's dressed the same, and it's one person from many different angles, but midway through the piece, it's like this brain kind of comes out on you, and it's this fascinating world. She creates really another world. Very, very exciting choreographer. Last work on the program is a work that I made for the company called 16 Plus a Room.
Fantastic.
So I have the joy of not only getting to be the artistic director, but every once in a while during a season to be able to choreograph, and I love it. It's like putting on another hat. And it's just a delight. I worked very closely with the dancers, as do a lot of choreographers. They participate very collaboratively in the work that we make. And I created a second version to it, so the version that we're bringing is the most revised. And it really is this idea, if you put 16 people in a room and you start tipping it, as if it's a metaphor for the unknown, what are the patterns that come out of that, and how is that a reflection of our world? It's a study of time.
I'm definitely going to come back to your choreography, but just a little bit more about the tour. You're going around, not just in London, you're actually going quite far in the UK. Mm-hmm. Why was that important to the company, to this tour?
Well, first, it's important for us to tour. It's important for us to tour beyond Canada, internationally. It's important for us to go to smaller and larger communities. What it does for us is it teaches us about dance. It teaches us about the work. It helps us develop also the work. Being able to come to London was the starting point, and of course everyone, it's a huge honor to be able to go to Sadler's Wells, and also just the work that's coming out of there, the artists that are kind of influencing dance today. It's really, really special and an extraordinary privilege. But to be able to then extend that and go through into the communities to do workshops, to work with the next generation of dancers, and to really have that additional conversation, and then to be able to show them the work is as important as going to the really large venues. It's that diversity of conversation and that being able to kind of stretch that profile is very important to us, and the communities want to see it. And the Dance Consortium here in the UK is very unique in the way that it curates this type of touring, this ability. It's so thoughtful and so it's so important to the development of dance, not just in this country, but also what it says to the rest of, it's really influencing. We're able to, it's influencing a lot of people, the way, the attention that dance is being given, and the way that it's being programmed, and that relationship that's being built between communities.
It is a very unique environment. Yeah, it's a very, very special environment. I agree with you, absolutely. So tell us about your role as the artistic director. You took up the directorship after being a dancer yourself. And you talked about some of the way in which you've influenced the company. Tell us about your vision, that is, what does the future look like for the company, for Ballet BC? And as the artistic director, what do you see are some of the changes that you would like to see either within your own company or within the dance community back home or globally, which is obviously quite a wide question.
Yeah, that is a very wide question. So maybe what I can do in answering that, because it's a wonderful, in-depth question. For us, why we make dance and how we make dance is as important as what we make. So to your part of your question about, how is this affecting? it's really important that the most important person in the room is actually the art. So if we are able to do that, then hopefully that spirit is philosophically is passed on in the work. So the kind of work that we make has that spirit inside of it, and that will get passed on. So we really care about what happened before us and what will happen after us, and that has to do with how much respect we give the moment that we're in, and that we work collaboratively as a group. Each dancer is a soloist within a group. So whether you dance the work or not, whether you were in the making, it's all important. So what is that doing for the future? Hopefully it's allowing dancers to have a future, first of all, to be able to make it a profession. Being able to employ a dancer in a company full time is an important endeavor that we don't lose. That we are able to make new work is an important endeavor that we can't lose. And that and this is why touring and also building a conversation at home is very important, that we have an audience that wants to have a conversation, and it's not about having an opinion about work, it's about experiencing it and having a dialogue. So it's about liking and hating something. It's not about saying, well, unless this is this type of work, a masterpiece, and what makes a masterpiece, but it's being able to really look at what dance can do and how is it different or similar to the other art forms. So all of that interests us as a company. So what is my vision for us going forward? It's to be able to do that and do that even more, to go deeper. So when people ask me this question, it's, often some people will say, well, of course, people want more money, they want more. Actually, when I got the company, we were in a major financial crisis. And one of the first things I had to say, or I found myself saying, is money doesn't equal standard. So if that's true, then the base of the company is actually about the practice, deepening our practice so that we are more sophisticated in what we're doing. And that means we have to look out, and then we have to look in. And we have to keep doing that work. And then with that in mind, hopefully the work we make is great, and it's going to help us go across the world. But it's first and foremost, why did we even step in the studio? And to make sure that if we love it, that we don't lose it. And so that's the vision going forward. And yes, if there can be a few more production dollars and things like that, that would be great. Globally, yes. And
locally, yes.
So part of the vision has always been of the company that there's a certain amount of attention on professional development and leadership, that the dancers have a voice, that they are able to express themselves, that they are also spokespeople or persons for art and for the artist in society. That's not just our company, it's their endeavor of doing it is going to open up the way for other people and to make sure people know how important it is, not just to them but to our society.
The way in which you're describing the future of the company, or what's intrinsically important to the company and to yourself as the artistic director, to me sounds very much like a treasuring, is how it sort of feels to me. And I wonder about, as the artistic director, you talk about the quality of dance. What do you look for when you're looking for artists to join your company? You talk about a lot of qualities there that are quite internal, but can be articulated externally through the structure and the work that you create. What do you look for in dancers?
That's a great question. And to the internal becoming external, we are always dealing with audiences. So there is always that openness, that generosity that one hopes for. So one of the things, I think over the past 8 years, now going into my 9th season, the audition process is quite intimate as well. So yes, I watch a ballet class, but that is like that much. We teach repertoire, we do improvisation, I build work on the dancers, I have conversations with them. What I'm really looking for is, yes, a great dancer, someone who has great training, classical and contemporary, but more than that, how does someone think? How curious are they? Can they laugh in the studio? Are they hungry to learn? Because as you probably are aware, dance requires an enormous amount of commitment. It takes us, we don't have a conductor helping us get through, so we have to spend many hours refining and defining what we do. So it takes an enormous amount of stamina and courage. So I'm looking for that in an individual. How do you find that in a short period of time when you're auditioning? But you can, you see it in someone's eyes. You see it in their need to have to do it, because we need that in the profession to really have this kind of honest and generous conversation.
And tell us about your your days, or a typical day as the artistic director, and no doubt it involves, as you say, working with dancers and funding, but describe what your crazy day must be like.
Well, there's not a lot of hours of sleep, but I am an artistic director that really enjoys being in the studio.
Okay.
So I love coaching the work. So I'm usually working, I take class with the dancers. So part of it's really important to me because I continue to learn. Yeah. I think through dancing. It's moving helps me. It's also being a part of community. That's the beautiful thing about our art form, is that it's community-based. And to be able to just kind of learn with the dancers still what they're working on. So if we do workshops, so I will enter into that process with them. Then I'll sometimes be rehearsing 6 hours a day, because that's our rehearsal day, so after class. And then in the morning before we start, during the afternoons, I'm in meetings. In the evening, I'm doing all the administrative work. I'm responsible for all the curating and programming and contracting, and I am a director that also looks at the finances and does. Although we have a wonderful team of people who are involved in that too, I am someone who takes that very seriously, and connects that to it not being a hindrance to what we can create, but my knowledge of that and my ability to work in that part of the company is important to also get, being able to create possibility. So yes, they're very full days, and I wouldn't say that there are many days off. But I am lucky to say that I love what I do, and I find it's important to do.
And how do you feel that, having been a professional dancer prior to your directorship, but also being a principal dancer with Ballet BC previously, how has that influenced how you've approached the artistic director role? Do you feel that it has?
Certainly it has. I wouldn't say that someone has to have danced to be an artistic director, just as I would say that I don't think someone has to have danced to be a great teacher. But I think that my time both in companies, the National Ballet of Canada being a classical ballet company, and then working with William Forsythe in Frankfurt Ballet, which was a more contemporary ballet company, that I was privy to different structures, also between Canadian and the European models. But then to also be a project freelance choreographer and a project-based artist, I was able to learn about that whole infrastructure. So my experience has helped me understand the nuts and bolts of the profession, and I think it's given me the ability to see things. I also asked a lot of questions when I was dancing that weren't just about myself as a dancer. It was about, I was fascinated from quite an early age about how we were developing artists, how we were coaching, why people were dancing, how people's careers paralleled their life. I was fascinated with the structures of the companies and the decisions that we were making, and it sometimes made me a little bit more of a challenging dancer because it wasn't just about myself dancing. So I think I was fascinated about how do you create a culture within a company for many, many years, and what does that mean for the future of dance?
And so you've taken that insatiable appetite for knowledge and understanding structures and applied it
to Ballet BC. One, because when I got Ballet BC now, 8 years ago, we were in bankruptcy protection.
Oh no!
So, and it had 20-something years behind it. So this was a company that I had watched as a young student at the National Ballet School. It had a history, it had an importance in the country, but it was at this moment of crisis. And so I looked at it as a study, and a lot of people thought I was a bit insane taking the job, but I also went, this is actually, if I want to study the culture of a company, of an organization, and to me it was almost like a dysfunctional individual, it was like an alcoholic, almost. How do you change the habits of an organization from within? This is what, unfortunate as it was, would be really the only way to really study this, is by trying to actually work on something that needs this kind of help. And so that's what we started 8 years ago, and now we're in the 9th season of that renewal. And
so how did you transform the company? What did you do to bring it back from the brink of becoming something that no longer existed?
There were a lot of things. One of the first things I did is I put the dancers at a board table as people, and I said, I'm going to work as many hours as we can, because we're going to be working with so many new choreographers. I invited, over a period of time, an enormous amount of people to come that had never worked with the company. I asked for them to do me a favor, because of course we didn't have very much money, and to basically show our audiences what was going on in contemporary ballet around the world, and then to start to get information from them. And then through that, the dancers were also being developed and nurtured. So we were building that from the outside and the inside, building relationships. and this kind of attention to quality of work. And that just took work. That's not something money can buy.
Not overnight.
Yeah, not overnight, yeah. But so it kept kind of really discussing what that was. And it hasn't been easy, but it's been very, very rewarding, and it's very beautiful to see. I love, although there are fires and miracles every day, I love watching people develop. I love watching that sense of, discovery and accomplishment, and to watch choreographers also just explore. I mean, ideas. I love ideas. So to be able to create an environment where I'm invisible, but people are supported, where they can take risks, they can fall, they can get back up, and failure is a positive thing.
Absolutely.
That takes time.
And you talk about the developing artists and dancers. What do you feel that is really important as part of that process? You talked about, failure and support, but is there other sort of practical measures that you apply for providing dancers with not only the skills to enjoy hopefully a long career, or a longer career than perhaps in the past, but also help prepare them for the future as well, beyond their stage career?
Yeah, I mean, very great question. And so of course we're looking at present needs, from the physio, the medical team that works around us, all of the different therapists that we have, the day-to-day work schedule, the really having a two-way conversations. So those are all things. But to the future, I mean, now about half of the company choreograph.
Really?
They teach. Some of them have been doing rehearsal directing. Some of them have gone into art administration and worked on different areas. So we kind of go, we don't force that conversation. It's more when people show interest, we've been trying to give them an opportunity. And I get so excited when they show that interest, because once you start to teach or get on the other side of the practice of making the art, you see things that you don't usually see when you're in it. And it just opens up the conversation that happens in the studio, and they just grow. It's really, and then they also want to keep dancing longer, because they take on more responsibility. They feel like everything's kind of learning from each other, and they're developing, and so that's what I keep trying to keep an eye on, is what people need, and that everybody is quite different.
So let's talk about you as a choreographer, but actually for me it's wonderful to hear that not only so many up-and-coming choreographers are being supported in your own company, but to have a program that has 3 female choreographers. It's quite a topic, of course, and a very necessary one about diversity in dance, but also supporting female choreographers in dance in what is often a male narrative world. Tell us about your approach to choreography. How would you describe your choreographic language in trying to, I guess, present works in this world that is unique and clearly wonderful, as you're bringing it over here? But tell us about your work.
I, of course, had a wonderful opportunity to work for one of our great contemporary choreographers, William Forsythe, and so that, and many others, but I'd say that Bill, the kind of environment of just research and creativity and experimentation, which was so privileged to us in Frankfurt Ballet in the 90s when I was dancing there. I mean, we were making pieces as we were dancing them. I mean, he was changing them as we were dancing them. It was so much great. I mean, all of his improvisational modalities that were coming out. So I have that in my history, and of course I'm still learning from those things. I'm still questioning them and still developing my awareness of them. So I think that I pass an interest on in the sense of really collaborating with the dancers. So I ask them often to take an idea and then to come back. And so I might say, what would happen if we take this, often I use text. So that's where my kind of relationship with the writing of Emily Dickinson for this piece and Virginia Woolf, it's if you start with this phrase or take something in this book that interests you and then go away and generate something from it. And so then we start to build this kind of foreign but then not so foreign language that becomes the movement vocabulary. And then from there, for me, it's going back to the concept. So I really refine. I love environments. I love states of things. So for me, it's always a kind of an abstract poem in a way. It's I'm usually, like for 16 plus a room with the study of time, my idea was that you could take all of the choreography away and just the transitions in the piece would be a frame of a piece. So it's a bit like saying, you know, that the frame of a house is solid as well, and then you put all the furniture and decor inside. But if you remove it, there's actually a piece of architecture there that's very sound and solid. And so I was kind of studying those things. So I'm fascinated with the possibility. I often change things a lot. Some of the sections, there'll be a dancer who is passing through a very choreographed phrase, but he's being asked to imagine that the ceiling is the floor and the floor is the ceiling. So then there's another layer. So I'm curious about pushing those possibilities. And some are successful, some are not so successful, but it's changing the responsibility of the dancer on stage I find quite fun, to give them a lot of voice inside of the work.
And for a dancer, and having been a dancer yourself, that must be a very, on one hand, or for some dancers, a very exciting opportunity, but for other dancers it must be thoroughly frightening.
Yes, but by the time working with us, they would already be less frightened, but because we're a small group, so we don't try to make this a project of 80 people or 100 people, but you're absolutely right. And so this is why training, what we are offering dancers before they become professional dancers, is very key, because to imagine that one, and this already started for me with being in a classical ballet company, any company now will require a dancer to have a certain amount of tools. It's not privy to one style. It's that choreographers want access to many different ways of approaching space and time in the body. So they want the training, but they want someone who can actually throw it up and turn it around and do all kinds of things. So that has to come in earlier, has to come in before, or they spend most of their career trying to figure it out. But what if they start the career already with some of that information? Then what can choreographers create? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but how do you approach those kind of questions? And also, because technique takes, classical technique takes, you're always working on a tendu for the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
You never
and
find
enduring.
it. Enduring, that's right. So it's a work in progress always. So how do you hold that? Absolutely, very specific and very intricate and beautiful training and to get that technique alive, and then also hold these other ideas of constructing and deconstructing, and many other things. But how do you keep that flexible?
And just going back to the fact that you said 40, how many dancers are also choreographers within the company, or budding choreographers?
Of 18, there's at least 9 or 10. 9,
so 40% around about,
yes.
Which is quite extraordinary. I'm not sure that I've
and
heard
male
that
and
before.
female. And there's it's about interest, and so everyone's able to do it if they want. And it also helps that we have an official training body by the name of Arts Umbrella, and so they also will employ them to choreograph. They have 2 companies, a junior and a senior company, and they're beautiful dancers that are dancing all over the world. There's a number of them in Netherlands Dance Theater, and one that worked also with Hove Schechter. So there's some, so they're really great, and they are asking those questions already in their training. So they're this prime environment for these young choreographers to try stuff. And it's because it's a student body. It also, you can work with larger groups and smaller groups, and there's a certain kind of freedom without too much pressure around developing. And that's another thing I'm very curious about, is how do we develop a choreographer? Do we throw them out there with an orchestra on a large stage when they're making their first piece? Is that fair? Or are we giving them too much too soon, and then it becomes, the relationship to choreographing becomes more pressured than it needs to be. And that has to do with the responsibility of those of us with structured environments that can help make it easier for choreographers.